In 1947, Lefty Kreh walked into Tochterman's Fishing Tackle in Baltimore, Maryland, and bought his first fly reel. Now, if you've been around fly fishing much in your life, I bet you know what that reel was. And I bet you might even have used one. It's the iconic Pflueger Medalist. And that's what we're going to talk about in today's episode of the Shop series. Welcome to the Shop, folks. I'm Sean, and this is a series where we just talk about stuff I've collected out here in the shop over the years, just like we'd be sitting in those chairs over there talking about it. I'll tell you what I know about it. I'm not an expert, but, I do like to look up stuff that I know a little bit about, and that's what we're going to talk about today is the Pflueger Medalist. And so in order to understand something about this Pflueger Medalist fly reel, you first need to know a little bit about that Pflueger company. So the Pflueger company started in about 1880 or so. It was started by a guy named Ernest Pflueger, he was born over in Germany, and then he moved to upper New York State, and he made he made potbelly stoves. Might have made that one. I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me after some of the other surprises that I've come across out here. But anyway, he then moved to Akron, Ohio, and started a molding business, working with metal products and stuff. And his first line of business was these things right here. So I hope you can see that. Do you know what that is? Let me get a little better view of that. That's rosettes for horse tack. Rosettes are just decorations for bridles and harnesses and saddles and whatever else. And so that's what Ernest Pflueger made starting out. But he liked to fish, so he also dabbled a little bit in fishing plugs and lures. And he was an inventor anyway. By 1880, he already had a whole bunch of patents to his name. He came up with the very first use of phosphorescent paint on fishing lures, and those lures, as you might imagine, are very valuable. Well, he died in 1890, soon after he started the business, and his son took it over. His name was Ernest too, and ran it for a while and diversified out of Akron, Ohio, so that they were selling everything. I mean, you find oil, split shot, hooks, lures, of course, all kinds of stuff. I'll show you some other Pflueger stuff I've got over here. And I could talk for hours just about Pflueger, but we're going to talk specifically in this series about the Medalist fly reel. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Now, I did make a note or two here so I won't forget anything. I told you when it started and what he was doing. The Medalist was first patented in 1928. And didn't hit the market until 1930. That's when it first showed up in the catalog. Well, 1930 was right in the middle of the Great Depression, right at the start of the Great Depression, and they didn't sell too good through the 30s, so those lures are really rare. And most of those early reels had a round line guard on them. They called it diamond light. If you find a Pflueger Medalist with a round line guard, they're usually pretty valuable. Some of them can bring up in, several $100s, so keep an eye out for them. In fact, the Pflueger Medalists, they advanced a lot through the years, and they kept going up on to 1980 or so. Were very popular reels. There's a group of fly fishermen out there, and I'm probably one of them, who are kind of set in their ways. And as a result of that, we kind of do the same things over and over again, and that works pretty good for us. And if you get something that works, there ain't no reason to change it. So a lot of us use those Pflueger Medalists, and I used them as a kid, and like I said, you might too. But anyway, they were three of the most common sizes were the 1492, which is like a 3/4 weight, 1494, a 5/6 weight. They did a 1496 for a while, but not many. And then I think there was a 1495 even, that was like a 7/8 weight, and then they even made some bigger ones. So usually they started with the 14 and the 90, and it's 2, 4, 5, 6, 7 on up to the bigger size reels is the way to tell. Pretty easy to date a Pflueger Medalist if you come across one, because there's different characteristics that fit with different eras of when they were making those reels, throughout the 1900s. Like I said, the most common thing to look for is that round diamond light line guard. Now, by the 1950s, they were doing rectangular line guards, also made out of a different material than the reel itself, and they called that dynamite too. And then by the 1960s, those round line guards were pretty much gone. They were all rectangular. They didn't have no line guard at all. Come out with a drag. The drags never were great on the Pflueger Medalist. The smaller ones were mostly click pawl. It's a little different from click pawl, but it kind of works the same way. And so they, there's a lot of different characteristics that allows you to date those reels, and the most common being that the better reels say "Made in USA" on the white spool cap. So look for that. Look for it says "Made in USA." You can even, like I see some people sometimes on the internet and Facebook and stuff like that, where they'll be catching fish and using a Pflueger Medalist reel, and I always think it's interesting to look and see how old the reel is, because you can usually just look at it by a glance and tell. The Made in USA went away in 1979. Well, first I should tell you this. Shakespeare bought the company in the 1960s, I think mid-1960s, 65 or 66. And reels made between 65 and 70 will say DA on the side of them. I don't know what DA exactly stands for, but they were made in Akron, Ohio. It might stand for dumbass, because they started selling them overseas in the 1970s. Eventually, the quality was so poor that they just had to quit selling them. But there's a light at the end of that tunnel, and I'll tell you about that in just a minute here. Let me look at my notes and see what I'm missing here, see if there's something else I wanted to tell you. I think I pretty much covered everything, except I want to tell you more about Lefty Kreh. But I also wanted to tell you about my vacation. So I went to Florida. We were fly fishing last week, and oh my goodness, if you're not following me on Facebook or Instagram, I hope you will, because I'd love for you to see the pictures, as we had a great time. We didn't just fly fish, we did some conventional gear fishing as well, but we did a whole lot of fly fishing. It was fun. A couple of years ago, I found a place. So my wife would have a conference down in Fort Lauderdale, Miami area every year, and so I go down there and hang out, and it's a good excuse to go somewhere warm for a while and find a good place to fish. I'm one of the few people that you'll find that goes to Florida and never sees the beach. I don't care nothing about the beach, but what I do care about is the great freshwater fishing down there that they have, and there's a lot of, as you know, probably invasive species in the Everglades, peacock bass and Oscars, and all kinds of different kind of cichlids, just crazy different species in that area right now, and it's really amazing fishing. It's really fun fishing. So I figured out some stuff, from doing it for a while, and a few years back I hit on a location that had some of the biggest Oscars that I've ever even heard of. Oh my goodness, it's way back in a side canal off a main canal. There's some, some pretty exclusive characteristics you got to look for to find them. You can find Oscars pretty much anywhere, but to find the big ones, there's some things you got to look for. And so I figured that out, and I had a trip planned with my sons Corey and Daniel the next year. And I wrote to them and I asked them, I said, how would you guys like to try for a world record, an IGFA world record on these big Oscars, since I think I know where they are? And they said, oh, yeah, we want to do that, but I don't think they believed me until we got there. And then we started pulling them out, and we seen how big they were. And so we're fishing out of a rented 16-foot flat-bottom John boat, and it really, one person could fly fish at a time is the only thing that's practical, and you get up in the front of the boat, and no trolling motor or nothing, because we're just renting this boat from a little dock there. And so Corey got up first, and sure enough, on his second or third cast, he popped the biggest Oscar I've seen in a long time. And I had bought the IGFA measuring ruler that you have to get the world record, the catch and release record. And sure enough, it beat it. You had to beat it by 2 centimeters, and it beat it. And so he owns the IGFA world record for these fish. So anyway, we had a lot of fun. We even got into some clown knife fish this year, but we didn't break that record. I think it'll be a while. I've heard people say, oh, I've caught bigger Oscars than that. Well, go do it. That record's right there for you to break. Let's see you do it. And you probably can, but you just got, like I say, you got to beat it by a little bit. So good luck with that. But anyway, back to Tochterman's Fishing Tackle on Alisana Street in Baltimore, Maryland. And Lefty Kreh walking in the door, and by his side is Mr. Joe Brooks. Have you heard of Joe Brooks? Another iconic fisherman from this mid-Atlantic area where we're sitting in right now. And the day before, Joe Brooks had taught Lefty Kreh something. Lefty was already a hotshot fisherman, and people knew of him, knew who he was. And so they went out to the Potomac River, and Lefty was showing him how to fish with conventional tackle, catching smallmouth. Well, they took a break, and Lefty tells this story. And in fact, I think he told it to my friend Gary, and he wrote about it in Angler's Journal magazine. And my buddy Joe knew Lefty really well, and another buddy Tony knew him well. A lot of people knew Lefty, and I got to fish with him too, and I'll tell you about that another time. But anyway, Joe got up on a rock, and it turns out there was some ants were floating across the river in that area there, some flying ants and landing, and the fish were rising and hitting them. And Joe recognized it and put on an ant pattern and threw it out there, and he was catching fish every cast. Well, Lefty had to get in on that. So that's why he met him at Tochterman's the next day, and they went in. And he bought a Pflueger Medalist reel on a South Bend fiberglass rod. And that's still an iconic outfit. And if you ever come across it, you might want to get you one, because it makes for a heck of a fishing outfit. And if it's good enough for Lefty Kreh, it's probably good enough for us. Now, Lefty didn't always use Pflueger's Medalist. In fact, he had an issue with them, and he didn't like the drag. And so Lefty was the problem solver. And the way he solved that problem, there's a picture of it right there. He just cut this out so he could put his fingers in there, or his thumb or whatever, and thumb that spool through the outside case, so he cut it out. So if you ever come across one, a Pflueger that's cut out like that, a Pflueger Medalist is cut out like that, might have been owned by Lefty Kreh. You might have something there. His original one is up in the Fly Fishing Museum in Vermont. So anyway, there's my stories about Medalist reels, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll tune in next time. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do, because I appreciate it, and I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate your shares. We're up over 10,000 views now on YouTube for the series, so I hope you'll keep tuning in, and thank you for that. And I'll see you next time.